All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. I am Tori, and today I am very excited to get a chance to chat to author Alex Robbins, who is the author of the War of the Twelves,
War of the 12.
series,
Perfect.
and also the Ruined Gods, which is coming. The finale, right, is coming out April
Yeah.
11th, which is very exciting. So, Alex, welcome to the channel.
Hi, thank you so much for having me and your very busy schedule between writing, reading, reviewing, interviewing, sleeping probably from somewhere in there,
Kind of.
raising children. Yeah, it's a
I
full,
like to keep
full, full
myself out of
schedule.
trouble, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You're not someone who likes being bored. I get the impression.
No, definitely not. But I'm very glad that you are generously spending your time with us this morning. So, would you be willing, for anyone that hasn't met you before, who's watching the replay or in the chat, would you be willing to let us know who you are and a little bit about your two series?
Yeah, so I'm Alex Robbins. I'd say a part-time indie author. I started writing about 5 or 6 years ago, and that was my first series of books, which is more sort of classic epic fantasy. So that's exactly. Oh, great, perfect. Yep, that's the first one. So that's the War of the 12 quartet. I call it quartet. You can call it what you want. 4 books, which is set in sort of more sort of classical fantasy world. So we're talking about knights and medieval inspired cities, states, that sort of thing. And so those are the first 4 books that I wrote in that series. And then my second series, The Ruined Gods, so that's more an ancient Greek mythology inspired series. So that's 3 books, which, as you said, the third book coming out in April, 11th of April. The first book is called Panacea, and it looks like this. This is the first
Those
book in the
covers.
series. Yeah. So yeah, that's Felix Ortiz and
Yep.
Sean King are just a powerhouse dream team. They don't sleep very much either.
Yep.
And yeah, that's so as I said, that's more ancient Greek inspired. So that's more Greek gods, the pantheon, minotaurs, harpies, gorgons. All of those sorts of things. Sorts of things you see from the films like Clash of the Titans and more recently things like 300 and those sort of films. But there haven't been a lot of Greek-inspired films, unfortunately. Not
No.
really. There's that sort of sword and sandals period, which was way before either of us were born, which is in the sort of 60s and 70s, where
Yep.
there are things like Jason and the Argonauts and with stop motion animation and things like that. But
Yeah.
recently, not much. There's a film
Well,
called Hercules with Dwayne the Rock Johnson, which was
yes. Oh, yes.
supposedly Greek inspired, but that was about it.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, I would love to see another reboot of that kind of storytelling. So we can always cross our fingers that we'll get some more of that.
Yeah, I think it's like all these European mythology, be it Spanish or Greek or French or it's a bottomless well, really. There's so much, and the more you sort of dive into it, the more obscure, weird mythological creatures you find. That I want to put that in there, and I want to put that in there. The ones that you don't hear about as much. I mean, everyone's heard of Hercules and Zeus and the other gods and the sort of the big main mythological creatures, but there are lots of little weird ones in there. It's like the body of a scorpion and the head of a woman with long hair and things like that you never really hear about that are really interesting as well.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
they had
lots
big
of things to write
imaginations.
about. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, they had sort of an excuse for everything. Every
Yeah.
problem that kind of like we do now, but we just blame it more on each other. Whereas before they used to blame it on, they used to invent things to blame it on. So it was never
Sure.
actually the people's fault. It was always, this weird thing that lived at the bottom of the well or that lived under a rock or
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So Zin had, so we have to talk about the covers briefly of this Ruined Gods series, because I remember when I was I think fairly early on when I started my Twitter account, or was on my Twitter account, that Panacea first came out.
Yeah.
And I remember like scrolling through Twitter and seeing that cover, and just my jaw dropped. I was like, wow. Like, first of all, gorgeous, incredible artwork by Felix Ortiz. And also, there's a minotaur on the cover, which that is my
Yeah.
favorite mythical creature. And so
Oh,
I don't get enough like minotaur fantasy. And so I
no.
was like, oh, instant, throw it on Goodreads. I want to read this when it comes out. So tell me a little bit about the like how you guys design the covers and
Yeah.
because I mean, wow, what a selling feature for this series for sure.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things I learned. So starting coming into the indie space, my first book was actually published. I started writing 5 or 6 years ago, sorry,
Mm-hmm.
but my first book was only published in 2021.
Mm.
Because there are things like COVID and stuff that got in the way of,
Yeah, that
yeah, it's so
yeah.
annoying. Yeah, so right, yeah, and so I've only really been dipping my feet into the indie space for about 3 years now, but I've already learned so much in that amount of
Yeah.
time. And that's one major piece of advice that I could give to people, which you've obviously taken looking at your covers,
Thank you.
but is the cover is really important.
Yeah.
You can have the best book in the world, you can have prose that rivals Patrick Rothfuss, or you can have a story that has more twists and turns in it than, I don't know, a story that has lots of twists and turns in it. But if no one actually picks up your book, they'll never know. So
Right.
if your cover isn't enticing, so your cover, your Amazon page, if you're selling a bit on Amazon, so the the blurb, you put on the back of your book, the cover of your book, the first few pages of your book, how the book's typeset, the font, whatever, and that is I'd say as important as the rest of the book itself. So the
Mm-hmm.
rest of the book can be brilliant. If no one reads it, then no, it doesn't matter
Right,
how
right.
yeah, it doesn't matter how great it is. So the cover is a really important selling point, and I often see I actually read books, really great books, but the cover, if I just saw the cover of the books, or if I was just scrolling through Amazon where there are 1,000 books that come out a day, and I'd just probably scroll past that cover without even stopping and
Right.
having a closer look. So you're 100% right. The cover is incredibly important. A good cover is
Mm-hmm.
really expensive, but I think that
Mm-hmm.
I've made the money back from
Yeah.
the money I spent on my covers I've made back, and I
Right.
think that's because the covers entice people to come and pick up the books.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what I wanted for these books, you're right. I wanted it to be quite an arresting image, so quite a powerful image. The fact that I didn't want it to be confused with historical fiction. So there's a lot of, if you look at the historical fiction novels today, a lot of the books in the historical fiction settings, it's often a sword and a shield,
Yep.
or I don't know, a warrior with a sword or whatever. And I thought if I just put something like that in the front, people might pick it up thinking they're going to get a traditional,
Yep.
ancient Greece, something like the 300 or something like that. So I thought I need to put something on the cover that tells people straight away that it's fantasy. I thought, what
Minotaur.
better? Yeah, I mean, hopefully no one will confuse that with historical fiction once with that
Yeah.
seeing that big minotaur on the front. And then for the art style, I thought something, I can't remember who said it to me, which is terrible because I won't be able to attribute the quote properly, but someone said to me that when you're looking at, when people are scrolling through Amazon or scrolling through Facebook or that sort of thing, they're looking for a cover that stands out. And so
Yes.
what you should do is that you should look at the covers that are in your sort of subgenre, and you should try and find something that's very slightly different. So at the time that I was putting the covers together, a lot of the epic fantasy covers that were coming out were very colorful. So there was
Yeah.
lots of, and they still are, and I'm not dissing that at all. There are lots of
Yep.
great covers. And my other series, The War of the 12 Books, also very colorful.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, what about if, instead of going for a lot of color, we go for no color at all,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
just sort of like highlight, a couple of elements in each one. So the first one, it's a sort of red. The second one has this sort of like blue,
Mm-hmm.
predominantly blue cover, blue
Yeah.
colors on the cover. And the third one, which is behind you there on the background, there is more sort of gold and yellow. And I thought that might draw the eye a bit more,
For sure.
and so when I talked to Felix about that, he said, "Oh, well, I've never done anything like that."
Fun.
Really? In your thousands of covers.
Right.
So we tried some different things, and we tried making it more sort of inked, more pencily, more, and we ended up going this grungy look,
Mm-hmm.
which means it's not as well defined, I'd say. I don't really know how to put
Mm-hmm.
it, but there's sort of dust and dirt and stuff all swirling around the main figures, which gives it a kind of bit of a rough look, really. And
Yeah.
the sort of the cloak is all torn and stuff on the, and then Sean King, who does the layouts, the typesets and the
Mm-hmm.
layouts of the front covers, he thought, oh, we should the cover title should be, in theme with this
Right.
sort of grungy look and this all these this dust and sort of torn cloaks and stuff. And like Zeus in the second cover has this big long stringy hair and stuff like that. So
Mm-hmm.
kind of keeping that theme going, and that's why the titles are all a bit grungy and sort of torn and worn as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm really pleased with them, but I don't think very many people have been unsatisfied with Felix Ortiz's artwork. I can't.
No, he's
I don't know
he's
if anyone's
amazing.
got. Yeah. I don't know if
Yeah.
anyone's got a piece of art back from him and thought, oh, don't like
No.
that. Yeah.
Nah,
Um,
he's a pretty solid choice for sure.
yeah, he is. It's actually, I'd say the only thing. It's not criticism at all, but I'd say the only thing is he's becoming a victim of his success a bit, which I think is
Yes.
something to be careful of as well. Is that when I first started doing the covers, he wasn't, I'd say, I'm sure he was very prolific, but we didn't see as much as his covers on display, I'd say, as now. I think also it's
Yeah.
partly because there are lots and lots of new authors coming into the indie space as well. But
Right.
he's certainly very prolific, and his covers,
Yes.
you can see, that's a Felix Ortiz cover,
Yep.
that's a Felix Ortiz cover, that's a Felix Ortiz cover. And I think yeah, certainly. I think for my next series, I'll probably change again and go with someone else,
Yeah.
just to keep some
Yeah.
variety there.
For sure. Yeah. I'm kind of looking at the same thing right now with my next series is like, okay, what style of artwork is going to fit, this particular book. So yeah, I think each series kind of deserves its own flavor of sorts. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if
For
we can
sure.
talk about your cover for example, I mean, your cover is just ticks all the boxes I just talked about, because
Thank
it's
you.
yeah, because it's incredibly arresting. It's intriguing, right? When you have, I'm talking about the Bloodstones. I mean, Phase is great
Yeah.
as well, but I think the Bloodstones is an especially
Thank
great
you.
cover. There you go. Yeah, we all have our books. Yeah, I always have my books just around, just so I can sort of
In
pick them up.
arm's
Yeah.
reach. Yep.
Look what's here.
Oh, look
Yeah.
at
And yeah, and it's the same. I'm looking at it right now on the screen, but the same sort of intriguing thing of, okay, what's going on with this guy? Why has he got this mask? And the fact that it's simplistic but complicated at the same time. There's not a lot going on, but what is going on is yeah, very intriguing. You want
Thank
to know
you.
more about what's happening. So it's really well done. So I don't know.
Thank
I didn't
you.
recognize the artist. So is that?
So Sarah Ferrari, she's been my best friend for 20 years.
Oh.
And I very briefly, because
Yeah, no, no,
this is
no.
about your books,
No,
Alex.
no, 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 no. It's a conversation.
But yeah, she when we sat down to talk about it, it was kind of a similar thing where I was looking at, I really wanted to try and capture the heart and soul and feel of the story,
Yeah,
like with Panacea, you have this very grungy, very ancient, very
yeah,
gritty kind of story, and that kind of combat military feel to it, which really lends itself well to that kind of sketchy, style and the lack of color and all of that. And for Bloodstones, that was my epic fantasy debut. It's the book I've been wanting to write since I was a little kid, and yeah, Sarah it's always been her. I grew up watching her doodle in the car on road trips, and so yeah, it was an easy. I want you to be on the cover of my first epic fantasy, because we've been creating together for almost 20 years, and yeah, it was an easy choice, and she just completely exceeded all of my expectations. So yeah, I'm thrilled with
but
it.
that's great, because you're kind of both lifting each other up, right? Because so now
Yeah.
that she having done that cover, and that cover being instantly recognizable, I mean, I'm sure there are lots of other people like me. I steal whatever I can. So when I'm looking for cover artists, often what I do is I go and look at other books in my genre, and I
Right.
click and I see who the
Who's that?
illustrators are, and
Yeah.
who the yeah. And
Yeah.
she's definitely someone who I'm sure that will happen to. I mean, there'll be plenty of people looking at
Oh
kind of go,
yeah.
oh, and who did that? You know, oh, it's,
Yeah.
oh, yeah. And yeah, so good for
Yeah.
her. That's a really great
Thank
collaboration.
you. Yeah, she's incredible. I'm thrilled that that she was on my cover, because I wouldn't have asked anybody else for that first one. I was like, nope, that's Sarah. If you want it, I want you to be on it.
Absolutely.
So kind of talk to me a little bit about because you've written 2 series now, which
Yeah.
congratulations. That's a huge accomplishment for
Thank
an
you.
indie author. That's awesome. Because I think it helps us to have kind of multiple entry points to us as writers, right? You know, if somebody wants a more classic fantasy, epic fantasy, they can go to the War of the 12. And if they want something like super grungy mythology, they can go for Ruined Gods.
Yep.
So tell me, as you've gotten into your career as a writer a little bit, what does your writing process look like now? And has that changed at all since you first started?
Yeah, it's always been terrible. I'm useless. But
I love
I'm us-
authors.
yeah. It's been yeah, somewhere between sort of self-hate, a couple of dollops of self-loathing, and then occasionally, but towards the end, I start to think it might be more or less okay. And
Yeah,
I'm always really surprised that that it actually manages to turn out into something that's readable. I think one of the mistakes I made first starting out is that I tried to I was worried that that no one would read my book because it wasn't as good as I don't know, Brandon Sanderson, or I think, like, you know, I read a
sure.
lot of Sanderson, or yeah, I'm a George R. R. Martin fan. I love his stuff. You know, it's
Mhm.
really intricate, it's detailed, descriptive. I love a lot of stuff that Vosper does. I love all the. I grew up reading sort of what I call the '90s fantasy. So I love, you
Sure.
know, David Eddings, Gemmell, Weiss and Hickman, you know, Dragonlance Chronicles, all that stuff. And when I first started writing stuff, I said, my stuff is trash compared to your stuff.
Yeah.
It's not. And I think if you go into it like that,
Yep.
you'll fail, because it
Yep.
won't be that good. But these are writers that, how many books did they? I mean, there's a story everyone knows that Brandon Sanderson wrote 10 novels before actually writing Elantris, which actually was the one that got published, and he chose not to publish any of those novels, which is
Mhm.
fine. And once you get over that hurdle, that the sort of first things you write aren't going to be they're not going to win Pulitzer prizes, or
Right,
you
right.
know, they're not going. You have to find something that I think I ended up sort of going with. I want to write something that I'd like to read, and I want to
Mm.
write something that I'd like to read, and that I'm not finding easily at the moment.
Right.
So when I started thinking about what I wanted to do for the War of the 12, is that I thought, okay, what do I want to read that I'm not seeing at the moment? And what it basically was shorter stories, because I
Mhm.
just had my second kid in 2017, and I had no time, and I don't know how people
Mhm.
like Matt at Beard of Darkness, or people like that, just had kids still find time to read and do other
Right.
things. And
Yeah.
anyway, and so I was thinking, got all these, you know, and I was reading. I can't remember. I think I was reading Oathbringer, which is
Mm.
one of Sanderson's books at the time, which was, I think,
Not a short book.
1,200 pages long or something like that. And I
Yeah.
just come off reading another really long book, and I was just thinking, God, I really want a sort of 400 or 300 page novel.
Mhm.
And everyone thinks when they talk about epic fantasy that epic means epic in length, but it doesn't have to be
Right.
epic in length. It can be epic
Right.
in story. To me, epic fantasy is something that is sort of world-changing events. That to
Mhm.
me is where the epic comes from. You can have it's my opinion, which is probably wrong, but my
Yeah.
opinion is that
No, that makes a lot of
you can
sense.
have an epic fantasy that's 400 pages long, in which, you know, the world comes under a massive threat, which is what happens in the War of the 12 books, or gods begin to walk the earth, which is what happens in the War of the 12 books as well. And all of my books are 300 or 400 pages long, and I think if you put my entire the entire War of the 12 quartet together, it's probably shorter than Rhythm and War, almost definitely.
Yeah.
but but it's short, it's fast paced, and that was something I really wanted to write.
Yeah.
I've gone off on a bit of a tangent
No, you're good.
with your
Go for
question,
it.
but get to the end. And so that, and then the other thing I wanted was something that was fast paced, which you probably realised when you were reading Panacea as well. So
Yes.
I like my books to move along at a fairly fast
Yep.
click,
Yep.
and I again, not having a lot of time to read. I like to I like if I'm going to read for an hour in the evening. I like at the end of that hour for the story to have moved forwards
Yes.
significantly, and
Yep.
which is again my personal
Yeah.
preference. And I know there are
Yeah.
lots of people that are fine reading for an hour and they're going to read 200 pages about a tree in a forest, and that's
Right.
fine. And there's some great authors that write great prose about trees and forests, and that's perfect.
Yeah.
But that's not really what I
Right.
wanted. And that's harking back to sort of like Michael Moorcock. I don't know if you know who he is. So he was
Yep.
a
Yep.
writer in the 80s, 90s, and he wrote a series called Erica Melboni. And this is a whole series of books, which were pretty much that. I'm so jealous. I want that. I want
Oh, I
that.
suppose because
Oh.
this isn't the cover that you guys have over there, probably.
Well, no, I actually have the so in the UK they brought out this whole series. So they're white spines with red text, and
Yeah.
my bookshelf is in their room, so I'm not going to get up and go get it. But it's sort of serialized in these really
Yeah.
short books, and I really want that. I need to get that. Yeah, so you know what I'm talking about. And these are all
Yeah.
fairly short stories. That some that I mean, there's an overarching plot in those books as well, but each story can also be read individually. And yeah, those sort of shorter stories, I found that as we're getting more and more into epic fantasy, there's a sort of page race of people trying to do like
Yeah.
longer and longer books, and oh yeah, like
Yep.
Sanderson's doing this, so oh yeah, Rothfuss is doing this, and or George R. R. Martin, his latest book is 2,000 pages long. And I think there's definitely a market for that, and I think there's also a market for shorter stories, which is what I'm doing,
Absolutely.
which is sort of palate cleansers in between these
Yep.
big epic fantasy novels as well.
Yeah.
So that was what I wanted to write. And to answer your question, is what my process was. Is I don't know how do you outline your books a lot? Do you just sort of dive in, or is it a mix of both?
A mix of both. Andrew Meredith is in the chat. He's one of my closest writer friends, and
And
he will get after me if I say that I don't outline at all, because that's
right,
not entirely true. I am more of a discovery writer.
yeah.
I sometimes will take a little bit of I got stuck here, so let me outline like the next chapter or two. But typically I'm pretty discovery written. Yeah.
I'm pretty much like you. So for the War of the 12, for example, I had a rough idea of a trilogy, and
Mm.
as then I started writing it, and then it spiraled a bit out of control and became 4 books. But
Yeah.
that was my original idea, and so what I normally and with the Rune Gods, it was the same. My sort of my general idea, but I'm really terrible at keeping any sort of schedule in life and in
Yep.
writing and just anything. I'm useless. So my if I don't have my Google agenda like beeping every 5 minutes, I have no idea what I'm meant to be doing.
Yep.
So what I normally do is that I have a beginning point and an end point, and then instead of my story doing that, it sort of does that. So I know how it's going to end. Yeah, I know how it's going to start. Obviously, I know how
Right.
it's going to end. But the way I sort of get there is that I'll go off onto a side path at one point and go through this other bit that I didn't think I was going to do, and then I come back to the main story. Or there's a character that I have fun writing, so I think, I was going to kill him off, but actually, I'll keep him around for a bit, and things like that. Or I'll find there's a sort of a plot point that just rears its head later on. I think, for that to be good, I have to go back and change that
Right.
other thing. So it's don't do what I do. I don't think it's the most efficient process, but I think it's. I don't know about you, but I find it maybe a bit more enjoyable because it allows you to. Again, to not be stressed, come back to the stress thing,
Yeah.
but not to not be stressed, because if you diverge from what your original plan is, I mean, it's all right.
Yeah.
And if you spend, some time writing something, but it's definitely, in my opinion, slower because you're
Yes.
sort of like going off on these little tangents. I think, maybe, that's not that great. So I think I end up maybe spending a bit more time in editing, because when I go back to, I think, this actually doesn't really work or something. So
Mhm.
you have, if you're going to be more a discovery writer or a pantser or whatever
Mhm.
you want to call it,
Yeah.
people who want to write like that are going to have to recognize that there'll be a bit more work to be able to sort of tighten it up a bit. Maybe I don't know
Right.
if you do that, but sometimes I
Yeah.
come back to, I think, whoa, where was I going with this paragraph? I've just gone off on this tangent, and I'm talking about muffins or something, and
Yeah.
I should get back to the plot. So I end up normally writing too much, and then
Mm.
going back and trimming it and stuff. So if you're not on a deadline and you're not, I mean, me, it's a side project writing. I don't write professionally, so I don't have deadlines.
Yeah.
I don't have a word count to hit every day. I don't have so I'm breathing down my neck saying I have to do this and whatever. And so that allows me to write like that. I think if I was doing it professionally, I think I'd probably outline more,
Yeah.
just so I had a bit more of a schedule, and so
Right.
cut it down into chapters and stuff like that. I think I'd need that sort of don't know what the word is, structure,
Yeah.
so I wouldn't go mad thinking, oh my God, I'm writing this, I should be writing this and stuff like that.
Right.
Whereas, but as I'm doing it as a sort of part time, it doesn't really bother me that it takes me longer
Right.
to write than if I had something more structured.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think too, it allows you to give whatever time the book needs to it.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
kind of gives us the time to, because I'm very similar. And I kind of have like a general idea, like for the sequel to Bloodstones, like when I'd like to publish it, but my primary concern
Does it
is
involve minotaurs?
no. Well, God, sort of. um,
Oh no, I have to read it now.
so there is actually a character in the first book. I kind of designed a race that's like if you took a minotaur and a Viking warrior and kind of put them in a blender.
Sounds messy and beautiful.
Yes, and so sort of yes, I have a minotaur inspired race in my trilogy. Yes. So, but yeah, I mean, part of it was how do I tell this story the way it deserves to be told? If that means that takes me more time, I will
Sure.
do it,
Yeah.
because I can, and also because I feel like the story I'm telling deserves that, the
Yeah.
time that it needs to become what it needs to be.
And once it's out, it's out. I mean, once it's
Exactly.
published, it's published. I mean,
Yep.
you can't. So well, actually, I don't know. With this very slight asterisk is that we're both in self-publishing, so
Right.
it's not an end to all things. I mean,
Right.
if you find out you've made a mistake or something you very slightly want to change, you still can. I'm kind of against going back. I don't think I've ever
Mm-hmm.
gone back and actually rewritten something
Right.
that's already been published, because I kind of find it weird having two versions out there.
Yeah.
I know some people have done that. They've gone back and like rewritten their earlier works. But I think my stuff is out there, warts and all. I think probably my worst book, certainly from a prose standpoint, is definitely the book I sent you. Sorry about
Yeah.
that.
Read it.
Obviously, it's the very first book I published, which is The
Yeah.
Broken Heart of Aurelian, because I was still kind of finding my feet a bit. And actually,
Yeah.
just reading that book, between the start of the book and the end of the book, you can see what I was trying to go with at the start and where I ended up. So the start of the book, the first few chapters are longer. There's quite a bit of exposition. Hadn't quite wrapped my head around, the sort of first book woes
Sure.
of doling out your expedition in little blobs rather than just like putting it all out there at once, which is
Yeah.
not the greatest thing, which is what I did, which can turn some people off. And I can see when I go back to read it, I can see
Oh,
the
sure.
mistakes, and it's over characterized in certain points. There's an overuse of adjectives and adverbs in many cases. People always say things with an adverb tagged on the end, so they'll say things blatantly or fearfully or happily, or which is something you need to cut down on. But that's all part of the learning process, and I still like it for what it is. And then I
Yeah.
kind of think to myself, if people read that and they think it's okay, or they like it enough to continue the rest of the series, they're going to get a really nice surprise, because the rest of
Yeah. Yeah.
the rest of the series is actually better,
Yeah.
in my opinion. It's written, I'd say, at a higher level than the very first book, and it's
Yeah.
better, it's paced better, and it's more enjoyable to read, I'd say. So I think if people
Yeah.
get through that first book and like it enough to go on, it's only going to get better. So I
Yeah.
think it's worth leaving those first novels, warts and all, for people to discover, and
Yeah.
sort of put your learning process out there, rather than just put it in a box and
100%.
not publish it at
Yeah.
all.
Well, yeah, and I actually really love being able to read, an author where you can kind of get to see that learning and growth journey as you go through their series,
Absolutely.
or from
Yeah.
one series to another. And I love that, because I think it really just goes to show that it is a learning process constantly.
Oh,
Like, we're
absolutely.
every book
Yeah.
teaches something new, right? So,
Yeah.
um,
Someone like Ryan Carroll and his amazing series. I mean, he in general is just a wonderful success story, as someone
mhm,
who he's and it's so well deserved, because he is someone who has obviously, you can find things on blogs here and there, or if you read interviews about him. He's someone who said, okay, I want to do this
mhm,
professionally, and I'm just going to devote my life to it for a year. So
mhm.
he read up on everything that, on the marketing side, publishing side, website, editing, cover, all that stuff. And I think he's an intelligent person. I know he's an intelligent person as well, but he put
Yeah.
all those things together. It's okay, this is my plan to do this, and he did it, and it worked. And I think what's great. Okay, no spoilers, because I only read the first two of his books, but I can already see between the first and the second, just the progress he's just made as a writer, just
Yeah.
between those, and people already saying that those are great. So
Right.
imagine someone like that, what they're going to be later on down the road.
Yeah.
It's incredible to see someone
Yeah.
mature like that as an author.
Yeah. Absolutely. So for you, I mean, you're pivoting between, Andrew and I actually had a discussion about pivoting in your writing career last night, and you're going from War of the 12, and now you're pivoting
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
Ruined Gods.
Yeah.
So what was that like, pivoting to a completely new world and characters? And was it easier starting the series the second time? Like, did you have new challenges that you were facing with the second one?
Yeah, it was pretty difficult. It was difficult
Mm,
to a point where I questioned myself a little bit, on
mm,
that. Uh, I think, I think it is, certainly for me, as an author, I wanted to, as we were talking about earlier, I wanted to try something different. I think,
mhm.
again, massive props to people who managed to write an 8 or 10 book series set in the same world and all that stuff. And I think I might go back to War of the 12 at one point,
Yeah,
because it's a universe that I like and I enjoy writing
yeah,
and stuff like that.
yeah.
But I think, I'm always interested in challenging myself. So I'm always interested in saying, okay, I've done this sort of style thing. I want to do something different now. So what can I
Mm,
do, which I'm comfortable writing about, that I have enough knowledge about. So I wasn't going to start writing, I don't know, romantic fantasy or something like that. I wasn't going to
right.
write, Miss Percy's Guide to, French Dragons or something. So I wanted to keep, in the fantasy vein, but I wanted to leave, some other knowledge I had on other subjects. And
Right.
I've been a fan of ancient Greece, more specifically the sort of classical age of ancient Greece, which is
Hmm.
basically starts with Thermopylae, so 300, and sort of ends around the death of Alexander the Great. So that sort of
Sure,
period.
sure. Yeah.
I was always been really fascinated, and so I thought, okay, well, I like that, and I like writing, so why don't I try and smooch both of them together? But you're right, it was difficult for a while for me to decide on, just how historically accurate I wanted to be, right?
Hmm.
So this is always the really dangerous part of writing something that is based on, historical fact, is that you have to decide how much of that you want to bring into your story, and how much you just want to say, yeah, if
That's fine.
it wasn't like that, that's all right. and uh,
Yeah.
and and so there's the research I'd already done just because I like ancient Greece, and then I did a bit more research about things I wasn't too knowledgeable on, like building materials and
Sure.
what sort of crops they grew in Greece at that sort of time, and modes of transport, and what sort of clothes they used to wear, what sort of dyes did they used to use, what sort of hair. Like I spent an afternoon reading up on hairnets because I wanted one of my
Ah,
characters to have a hairnet, and I wanted to know whether hairnets existed, and they did, but only under certain forms and were worn by certain social classes and all that. So you
sure.
can really go down these rabbit holes.
Oh yeah.
And I think people that write historical fiction full time, really kudos to them, because
Yep.
yeah, there's a lot research that went into it. So when I finished the War of the 12, the first thing I actually did, I spent 3 or 4 months, I'd say, just researching stuff, and it was fun,
Yeah.
and sort of deciding where I wanted the story to go at that sort of time. And I'd been, when did I go to Crete? It's a couple of years ago was when I went to Crete, and I went to Knossos, which you as a Minotaur fan, you might have heard of. So Knossos is
Mm-hmm.
a palace in Crete, which was supposedly inspired the myth of Theseus and the Minotaur. So
Mm-hmm.
it's you can look up on Google the Palace of Knossos. So it's been partially restored. So there's all these sort of bull effigies everywhere, and all of the columns have bull horns on them, and they're
Yeah.
like drawings of bulls everywhere, and the underneath this palace was supposedly an actual sort of labyrinth
Mm-hmm.
where there wasn't a Minotaur, obviously, but
Oh sure.
this is supposedly, and that's what they say, yeah,
Bummer.
covering up. Yeah, just like there's in Zone 51. Yeah. So supposedly there wasn't really a Minotaur, but yeah, it was, and just going there and seeing those sort of places, I thought, oh, this is cool, and this
Yeah.
is just, and this is sort of like myth and reality intertwining between this guy who obviously really liked bulls, and so all of his stuff was to do with bulls, and then just from that they got all of the sort of mythology of having this half man, half bull, and all that stuff, and that he used to lock people down there to get devoured by his half bull son and things like that, and that was that. I mean, what is that? That's fantasy, really, isn't it? I mean,
Right. Right. Right.
that's people taking history and then twisting it to make their own stories, and that's what the Greeks did. They took things that, like not to go off on a massive tangent, but like
No, you
Atlantis,
did.
right?
Yeah.
Atlantis is based on an actual island in the Mediterranean, or the Aegean Sea, which is still called Santorini. So there's an island in the Corfu, sorry, beg your pardon, Corfu. No, Santorini, one of the two. No, I think it's
Yeah.
Santorini. Anyway, it was an island in the Aegean Sea, and it had a volcano, right? And the volcano
Mm-hmm.
exploded, and so a massive part of the island sank. And so that was the sort of inspiration to the myth of Atlantis, and
Right.
islands sinking under the sea, and all of that. And that's really interesting as well. That's people taking things that actually happened and then putting their
Yeah.
fantasy spin on them. So Panacea is that. So it's taking elements from history, from ancient Greece history, and taking all these sort of myths and legends, mythology, Greek mythology, and then spinning them, putting my own little spin on them, and making them something completely different. So, for example, in Panacea, or the ruined gods as a whole, the male members of the pantheon have been expelled from
Mm-hmm.
Olympus. So the Olympus is now completely ruled by the sort of matriarchy of Hera and Aphrodite and Artemis, and Persephone is now rules the underworld, which is not
Mm-hmm.
called Hades, because Hades has been kicked out of the underworld. So yeah, female empowerment, and so they sort of, and the to even speak the names of these male gods that have all been excluded is prohibited, because in this series the gods get their power from belief. So it's a subject that's
Mm-hmm.
already been, there's lots of fantasy books that use this sort of trope, but so the more people believe in the gods, the more powerful they become. So by trying to erase all trace of the male pantheon from history, like they boil down the statues, and they deface
Mm-hmm.
the temples and all that stuff. The idea is that they become, they sort of fade from thought,
Right.
and eventually die out. And that's kind of the only way you can kill a god, really, because they're immortal otherwise. But if no one believes in them anymore, then they just sort of fade away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's yeah. There's such a we talked a little bit before the stream started too with that difference between true historical fantasy, which has the historical part first, right, and then this kind of subgenre of mythology inspired fantasy where you're given a little bit more freedom, if you will, to really kind of play within that mythology and that historical space, but the fantasy comes first. It's the fantasy prior to the historical aspect. So from your perspective as somebody who enjoys historical fiction or fantasy and also writes this kind of mythology adjacent fantasy, what is your takeaway from what is the biggest difference between those two? Because I feel like we talked about before, a lot of people kind of roll them into one and
Mm.
expect kind of the same things out of them for the most part.
It's something that's pretty difficult to define, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, what I originally thought, and this might be completely wrong, is that I thought that historical fantasy was fantasy set in a historical setting.
Mm.
So it would be, for example, I'm trying to think of a good example in books I've read, but it would be, for example, this is a really bad example, okay? But something like Harry Potter is will be in several years considered historical fantasy because it's something that it's a real world place that happens in London and Scotland and in places like that, and it's taking our world and
Right.
adding a fantastical spin to it. Or something like anything that sort of happens that, I don't know, some sort of steampunk or
Mhm.
kind of like alternative history as well. I think those sort of things to me are all sort of mixed together as they're taking place with things that happen in our world. So if my book was actually set in ancient Greece
Mhm.
and it had actually, for example, it starred I don't know, some sort of historical figure, Xenocrates or something like that, then perhaps to me that'd be more sort of historical fantasy. So it's
Right.
taking something that actually happened and putting a fantastical twist on it. I'd say what I'm writing, it's more sort of pure fantasy because it's taking elements of our myths and legends, but
Right.
changing them into something different. So they're
Right.
not actually recognizable. So they're like the Minotaurs, I'd say the most recognizable. But for
Mhm.
example, the Harpies that are in the second book are different, and
Yep.
the Titans that appear in the third book, not to give anything away, because it's called Titanica.
It's
The
on the cover.
Titans that appear, yeah, and there's a Titan on the cover. The Titans that appear in the third book are also very different. So I'd say maybe I've got another example, which is also some great, but something like God of War, right? So God of War
Mm.
is
Yeah.
both series of those God of War video games. So the first series, which is actually set in ancient Greece, so that's taking real places and real
Yep.
battles that actually happened, and then putting a mythological spin on it. And even the more recent versions is sort of doing the same with the Viking
Right.
period. Um, Whereas I'd put something like John Gwynn's Bloodsworn with the Shadow of the Gods, Hunter of the
Yep.
Gods. That is him taking Vikings basically, but then transporting them into a completely different fantastical
Right.
world. So I don't know if I'd qualify that as Bloodsworn Saga. I don't know if I'd qualify that as historical fantasy to
Mhm.
me
Mhm.
personally, because
Mhm.
it's not happening. It's not happening in a part of our history. It's
Right.
happening. It's more sort of Viking inspired epic fantasy is what I'd call it.
Right.
But I'm not I'm not a walking dictionary.
No, but I think that
I'm
makes
also
a lot of
English,
sense.
so
I think that makes a lot of sense, though. And I mean, when we talked about it earlier, I brought up like Sword of Kaigen being another example of something kind of similar to
yeah,
what
very
you
good
do,
example.
where
Yeah,
she's taking this very heavily Japanese inspired world and characters and using Japanese words and but it's in its own world. It's a fantastic place. It's not meant to replace our history exactly.
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Um, so yeah, I think that's a really interesting distinction because, like you mentioned, sometimes people with historical fiction or fantasy, it's so much about the details and the
yeah,
accuracy. And when you pull it into a fantasy world, you're allowed to kind of suspend the disbelief a little bit more, which I think lends to the escapism factor, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. And I think the thing about historical fantasy, sorry, is that you're right in that we're getting closer to historical fiction. Like, for example, if you set your historical fantasy in Greece, you'd have to know how long it took to get from Athens to Thebes, or you'd have
Right.
to know, I think you'd have to make it a bit more. You have to do a bit more research about
Right.
places and things like that. I think for it to be, if you wanted to keep the historical setting. Whereas
Right.
I was just like, F it, I'm just going to do it somewhere, and I can just make up my
Whatever
own
I want.
distances, and I
Yep.
just be
Yep.
like, well, these people can fly now, and this guy can do this, and I just don't care. And
Yeah.
it's a lot more liberating. But conversely, I also know lots of people really like doing that research. They really
Right.
like to be able to tell you, oh yeah, or like these wicker baskets wouldn't have existed because they didn't have this sort of reed to do these sort of things.
Right.
And you're like, oh, interesting. But yeah, to each their own. And I think that
Yeah.
writing already takes up so much free time that it's you have to be. I mean, like with everyone else on the planet, you have to decide how you want to use what free time you have. And as we get older, I think we get
Exactly.
less and less free time.
Yeah.
And so we have to decide what we want to do with that free time. Do you want to spend it researching stuff? Do you want to spend it writing? Do you want to spend it marketing? Do you want to
Right.
spend? I mean, that comes back to the age-old, the age-old argument between is it better to be self-published or traditional published? I don't know if you, when you were Phase, your first book obviously was self-published. When you were thinking about writing the Bloodstones, did you ever think about maybe going a traditional route, or were you saying that it's like
Nope.
self-publishing?
Yeah, it for me personally, and I have a lot of, I know a lot of people in the trad pub industry and just incredible authors, and I think it really comes down to the individual, right? Like because for me, giving up that timeline and that control to someone else is never something that has been attractive to me personally. I know for a lot of people, having that structure and having other people kind of, in essence, run that for them, it kind of frees them then to just be in their writing cave with their stories and take some of that off their plate, because wearing all of the hats, as you well know, is a lot. Like it's a lot. But yeah,
I remember before going. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, for me personally, I've been self-published since I was 14. And so that's the world I know, and that's always been my comfort zone.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember before sort of reading up a little bit on indie publishing before. I was the same as you. I didn't really, I was pretty sure as soon as I even started writing, before I'd even found an editor or cover artist or anything, I was pretty sure that I wanted to go the self-publishing route. For creative control, like you said. But I remember reading up about the sort of differences between the two, and reading things where people were saying, oh yeah, if you're self-publishing as a business, because you have to do all your sides on top of writing.
Right.
I was like, it'll be all right. I just like put together a website, put my book up on Amazon, find a cover artist, it'll be fine. And the more you dig into it, like, no,
this is a lot more work than it sounds
you
like.
are doing everything. Yeah, so you'll be spending, I don't know how many hours a day looking at your cover, and you'll be spending and I'm starting to dip my feet into ads now. So a bit of advice I could give. I don't know why I'm giving all this advice, because I haven't been in there.
Please
anyway,
do.
a bit of advice I could give is that I made the mistake. I started trying to do a little bit of advertising when sort of the first two books of War of the 12 came out, and it wasn't gaining a lot of traction and stuff, and I was spending a lot of money and not getting any return. So I sort of stopped doing that. And then I started going back into it. I think, when did the last book come out? Was it last year or the year before? I can't remember. Anyway, I started going back to it once the entire series was finished.
Yeah.
And the return was obviously much better, because there was the read through of people reading through to reading the whole 4 books. Right. And I don't know. I honestly don't know. I'm sure it happens a lot, but I honestly don't know how today in epic fantasy, someone who prices their first book $3 or $4, let's say, for a digital version, I really don't know how they would make money back on that from advertising, because the cost has become so high now, whether you're going
Right.
through Amazon or Facebook or BookBubs or whatever channel you're using to advertise your books. In epic fantasy, again, I'm not talking about. I don't
Right.
know
Right.
how it works at all, and I know I know that there are other areas like romance where it's easier. But in epic fantasy, the cost per click for Amazon ads now, and the amount of money you need to invest into Facebook ads. Means that it's pretty hard to make your money back just on one book. And I found that out the
Right.
hard way. And I'm just sort of going back into advertising a bit now.
Hmm.
That is a very long-winded way of saying, but that's something else that takes up more time, right? So you have your
Right.
cover, you have your editing, you have your marketing, which I'm really bad at. You have, you have your socials, you have trying to get reviews, you have reviewing other people's work, you have editing, you
Yep.
have, yeah. So you have all of that stuff. You have your website, you have your mailing list if that's the sort of thing that you want to get into. So then you have to do your newsletter, which means you have to have interesting things to say in your newsletter.
Yep.
And so there's all of these things that you have to sort of have to get your maps done if you want to have maps in your book, your chapter headers if you want to have chapter headers. You have to make sure your formatting works. So you can hire someone to do your formatting, or you can do it
Right.
yourself. But either way, you're gonna have to check it. So you're gonna have to check it works on your Kindle. You're gonna have to check it works, on your iPad or whatever. You're gonna have to send off for proofs of your paperback version. I'm sure you've done all
Right.
this. Send off
Yep.
for proofs of your paperback version. Check the formatting and
Or
that. Check
several.
several's better. Yeah, check
Yep.
that Amazon haven't mucked up the coloring on the color grading on
Ugh,
your cover, which they always do.
they always do.
Decide whether you're going to go wide and then go with someone like in Spark to have your books distributed widely into brick and mortar stores. There's always
So
something on
much.
top of the writing to do, and you're doing this, and at the same time you think, okay, yeah, but I need to plan my next books as well, so I can have them coming
Right.
out. So you're doing like the cover one thing when you start doing the thing on the other thing, and if like
Yep.
me, you have a day job and you're doing other things in the day, yeah, I can't stress enough how much self-publishing isn't just writing, and people
Yeah.
that aren't interested in that aspect of self-publishing,
Right.
I think unfortunately they might not get out of it as much as they'd like, because
Yeah.
they'll be shoehorned into doing these things they don't necessarily want to do. I don't mind doing it. I mean, it's time consuming,
Right.
but I quite like
Yeah.
fiddling around with the website and stuff and doing things like that. But people that really hate all of that aspect of it, they really aren't going to be pleased when they self-publish their book and it comes back with printing errors, or the font's
Right.
wrong, or you really have to be on top of all of the different aspects of it if you want it to work. So I
Right.
think that's probably the most important distinguishing factor for me. That, and the other fact, I don't know if it was the same for you, but you were talking about the time in between. Well, traditionally published, you once your book is edited and you have the cover and you get the proofs back and it's all okay and everything, you hit the publishing button on Amazon or Kobo or whatever, and in 2 days your book is published. If you're
Right.
traditionally published, you write your book now and it comes out late 2025, 2026. The
Yep.
people I'm talking to in the travel industry, most people that are handing in manuscripts now, it'll be a year and a half, or it'll be 2 years. They don't really know,
Yep.
or it'll be, so you have to be prepared for that as well. Something you're writing now,
Right.
you're not going to see it on shelves for a year and a half to 2 years, and you have
Right.
to be okay with that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean that freedom that we have in the indie sphere is a pro and a con, right? Because
Yeah,
we have that control and we can put out a book tomorrow if we wanted to,
yeah, people
but
do.
also, yeah, it's crazy. Which it was funny because you were talking about, taking a little bit of time. You've published 7 books now in like
Yeah, it seems like a
2021.
lot, doesn't it? Yeah, yeah,
That's a
yeah.
lot.
Yeah,
That's like
yeah.
3 years.
So I
That's
cheated.
amazing.
I cheated. I cheated. The first two were written before I started.
Okay, but even
So
if you just do 5 books in three
yeah,
years, that's still very impressive.
yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, yeah. I also the other thing is that they're not very good. So
Well, I don't know that I would agree with that.
but yeah, but that no, but to me, in all seriousness, that is also another sort of defining factor. Is how perfectionist are you? I mean, I think
Mm,
the when I reread my books, I think, oh, these could be better.
oh,
You're always
sure.
thinking like these could be better. If I just spent another month of rewrites, I normally go through. I don't know if you're comfortable in sharing how many sort of editing
Yeah.
passes you do on your book, but I normally do four
Sure.
three or four. So I'll go through. It'll go to the editor. Yeah, it'll go to the editor once, and I self-edit. So that's normally two passes, and it goes to the editor once. It comes back. I read all that. So that's three. It goes back to the editor again, and then it comes back again. So that's four. Then I normally do another one, five, and I probably actually it's sometimes six because when I get the paperbacks, I sometimes read through it again and I check off little things that I've seen.
Yeah.
But that's enough for me. I just can't.
It's
I can't take
it's
it anymore.
Yeah.
That's enough. Like once I've done like 4 or 5, I'm just like, oh, I just had enough. You know? And I think that maybe if I did more, I could probably make them even better. But after a while, you just want to move on to and that's why you're writing more stories. So you're editing one when you're writing another, and you're like, yeah, after a while, you just want to get it out there with whatever mistakes or with the things. And then when the reviews come in, so people that didn't like that bit as much, you think, oh yeah, well, me too. I didn't like that bit as much. It could have been better. It could have definitely been better. You know, after a while, you wanna share it with people, and that feedback then becomes interesting for you're always trying to get better as a writer.
Right.
So I know that there are people that don't like to read their reviews. I kind of it's kind of not a big problem for me. I don't, and I think most negative reviews. There's only one review that I got that wasn't very helpful at all, which was a review I got on Goodreads for one of my books. And it was 1 star, and the review was sad face, and that was it.
Yeah.
I was like, well,
thanks.
I'm not. Yeah, I could try and learn from that. Yeah, was it? Were you emotionally devastated? Was it? What happened? So I couldn't take much from that review. But most reviews, even more critical reviews, I find really interesting because there's always things we think, oh yeah, you know, but he's right or she's right. That I can definitely take that and use it to improve on future books, and hopefully by the time my 10th book or my 11th book comes out, I'll have taken all these little things I'm getting and use it to improve, you know, my own writing.
Right.
So I find those sort of reviews interesting.
Yeah.
But as to your answer, yeah, I think I can have that sort of rate of putting books out on a fairly, I mean, you said it's 5 books since 2021, so that's not a massive amount. That's 2 a year, I guess. Yeah, I guess that's quite a lot.
This will be my first year where I might put out 2 books this year. Like, we'll see.
Well, there you go. You see? Well, there you go. That's how it starts. It's a slippery slope, and then you'll be like, oh, you know, you bring out you'll be like Brandon Sanderson. You'll be like 5 manuscripts. I just wrote these in my coffee break.
Oh my gosh.
It's I think it kind of becomes easier as well because you get more of a handle on your voice. So, but you need to sort of get into the all authors talk about the zone. But I think it gets a bit easier to get into the zone when you have a bit of a better handle on your voice, you know, and how you want to express yourself through your writing. And finding that voice is a bit tricky, and it changes a bit because the books, even though it's me who's written both of them, but the two series, the trilogy and the quartet, do have a very slightly different voice. I think the mythologically inspired books are a bit heavier. There's a bit more grief, and it's more of there's a bit more of a sort of exploration of grief that goes on in those books, because there's something happens in the first book that sort of carries on through the rest of the trilogy, and it's sort of dealing with grief and overcoming it as much as we can overcome things like that. Whereas the War of the 12 is more it's not lighthearted, but it's more simple in its themes. It's more they're good guys and bad guys, and they just go at it for a while, and one comes out top in the end. That's more or less it. So it's thematically a bit lighter, I think. So they were different to write for that as well.
Yeah. There are a couple comments I wanted to pop up on the screen. Really quick. First, Timothy says, "Hello, Alex. Looking forward to book 3."
Hi, Timothy. Grail, not long to wait now. Tim has been a fervent supporter of the Ruined Gods, which I really appreciate, and has been enjoying them so far. So I really hope I didn't disappoint you too in the last one.
that's always the pressure as an author, right?
It's terrible. I hate it. I really hate it because because I I always think I've done okay, but I think that but maybe people that are reading it are thinking it's going to end completely differently. And
Mm-hmm.
this last novel, I think, doesn't end at all like people think it's going to. So I really hope that people go, what?
What?
And because it has to
Yeah.
be, yeah, it can be, there's a twist, and if people get the twist, I'll be happy. But
Yeah.
it's like it's like the Sixth Sense. If you don't pull it off properly, people are going to be scratching their heads and thinking, "Well, that's weird."
Right.
So hopefully it'll work out.
Yeah. Well, and I think, too, when you get to an end of a series and you've established these characters that people have really invested in and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I know, the ending of my trilogy at this point, and I already know I'm going to have to go into hiding probably
Oh,
from
great.
that last book.
That's why you're getting
But
all these interviews in now.
yes, I'm going to just hide.
Curl up in it, yeah, and just don't turn on
Yeah.
Twitter for 2 weeks.
Yes, I will.
Yeah.
Yeah, but part of it is, as authors, I think we owe ourselves the story that we want to tell, and
Yeah.
you can't please everyone, and somebody's always going to be upset at somebody's decision, or somehow, what the book ended as, or whatever it is, and that's okay. It's not, our books aren't for every single person that
No.
reads them, and that's okay.
No, and I'm always really wary of books that have overwhelmingly positive reviews, because I always think,
Same.
because no one thought that was just all right. I mean,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with it at all. Not, very, very rarely I read a book and I think, oh, that's just, there are things about, even things like that I really love growing, coming back to the classic fantasies again, even stuff like the Belgariad, or the Tamuli, which David Emmings wrote, which I actually prefer to the Belgariad, or the Dragonlance Chronicles. I think they're great books, but I always find little niggles
Oh,
and little
sure.
things that I'm not. It's very rare that I'd sort of give something a 5 star. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm always wary about that. And you're right. You're not. I always think that that's another decision I think you have to make if you want to go into writing, is that you have to think. You have to. I think the first motivation needs to be, are you writing for money? If you're writing for
Right.
money, I think there are certain things that you need to step down and say, okay, I want to make money. Okay, so I need to get these tropes in here. I need to
Mm-hmm.
get some dragons in here. I need
Some romance and
I
some
need
dragons.
to, yeah, I need some
Yeah.
romance in here. I need a broody character,
Yep.
who hates himself but he
Yep.
overcomes himself. I need to make sure my books come out at least once a year so people keep interest. I need to, I need to invest heavily into marketing. I need to make
Mm-hmm.
sure my book is seen by people. I need to get lots of reviews in. I need to get my advertising out. I need to, lean into these tropes. I need to do this. My endings have to be, as you were saying, they need to be broad enough so that people can appreciate them. I shouldn't do things to my characters that people aren't going to respect about. And there are people that have done really well not doing any of those things. But I think it helps a bit if you
Mm-hmm.
if you go, you have to. But that means where you have to draw the line of how much are you writing for yourself and how much are you writing for other people.
Yes.
And I remember when I finished writing War of the 12, there's a lot of sorts of feedback I got after the last book came out. People saying, "Oh yeah, so what's going to happen now? And you're going to carry on doing this, obviously, because there's lots more things to do and stuff. We want to know what's happening and stuff." And it's out of the 2 series. It's the War of the 12 sells exponential factor better than the Rude Gods trilogy. And so if I wanted to carry on that War of the 12 series, that would be the better financial
Right.
option. That would be
Right.
because if you as we were talking about earlier, if you brought out 10 books in the same series, if the person likes book number 1, they're going to probably read the 9 others, right?
Right.
So if you're pricing each subsequent book at say €5 or $5, whatever, you're getting $45 per person who reads through that series. So that's pretty great.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what I wanted to do. So I think a really important rule is that you should write what you want to write and not what other
Yes.
people not what people want to read. Maybe I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but you
Yeah.
definitely want to, and you'll if you get pigeonholed into into writing things that you think other people are going to like, I'm not sure you'll be as satisfied with the result.
Yeah.
You'll be better. You'll be making maybe more money, but you might
But
not
it's not
be.
as much truly you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're
Yeah.
right. Yeah, and if people don't like what you've written there, then you'll write something else that'll be different. And maybe the people
Right.
didn't like that one, they like the other one. I've had people that have read the War of the Twelve that have gone on to read the Ruined Gods, say, oh, what's this? I didn't like this at all.
Yeah, right.
and possibly the other way around. People that have come in reading the Ruined Gods, and then that have maybe gone on to War of the Twelve and have thought, oh, this is very different.
Mm.
To the ancient Greek stuff. It's completely different. And yeah, I think you're right. You have to write what people want
Yeah.
to. But saying that has just intrigued me even more, Tori. So I'm going to have to read this now.
Well,
I
I
just
hope
have
you
to add
enjoy
it.
it.
Yeah, I just need to add it to my list of because I keep saying that to Tim as well. That I need to read because I don't know if Tim's still on there, but when's your third book coming out, Tim? Is it coming out
It's
this year? Because he's
pretty
got.
soon, I think.
I think it's pretty soon as well. So I need to. What I normally do is that I don't know if this has happened to you, probably not, but I found I've since I started writing, my reading schedule has
Oh, it's
just
fair.
gone,
Yeah.
it's just crashed and burned.
Yeah.
And I used to read sort of 50 or 60 books a year, and now I'm down to about 10. So
Mhm.
I think at some point I need to sort of have a break and just
Yeah.
go on a
Just
sort of
read.
reading binge, just because that's where you get a lot of inspiration as well, isn't it?
Right.
Reading other stuff,
Yes.
and I kind of need that. I think so. I have all
Yeah.
this. My Kindle is just full, and all this
Packed.
stuff. Anytime there's an indie book sale, I just load up
Yep.
on 99-cent books, and they're just there.
Yep.
And then I'm a
Yeah.
mood reader. So, and what when I'm writing, I often read stuff that isn't linked to what I'm writing about. So,
Yes.
like at the moment, I finished up The Expanse, a sci-fi series where
Oh, nice.
I was reading The Ruined Gods, and at the moment I'm reading My Life with Footnotes, I think it's called, which is
Mm.
the Tay Pratchett biography of Tay Pratchett. I don't know if you heard of Tay Pratchett.
Yes.
He's an English,
Yes.
really well-known British author, and so they're things that are different, and
You're
it's
right.
a different escapism to when I'm writing.
Yeah. So it keeps that creative energy going, but it's
Yeah,
not, exactly
not
the
more
same
fantasy.
as right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ryan Skeffington says hello, good morning for me,
Hi,
good
Ryan.
evening for
Yeah, it's getting there. Yeah, it's
yeah, yeah.
6 p.m. here, so we're getting there. Yeah.
Ryan wants to know, after many novels, do you feel like you can sort of breeze through any stages of the writing process, i.e. planning, drafting, editing, or all of this, or are all of the stages still an effort?
Oh, Ryan, if only you knew. It's still an effort. I'm
Yeah.
planning. We talked about. I don't really plan that much.
Mm-hmm.
Drafting is just terrible. I'm just terrible. Yeah, I lose focus on things we're talking about. I go off on tangents. I go on. Editing has become a bit easier. That boils back down to sort of voice thing. I think when you find
Mm-hmm.
find your specific voice, you sort of get into a way of saying things that you can
Yeah.
pick out easier when you're rereading yourself. And I find that's become a bit easier. It's become easier finding sort of doing covers and all that things because
Mm-hmm.
I've spread my tendrils out a bit more into the artistic community, so I have a bit more contacts for doing covers and things like that.
Yep.
Writing is still is still really hard.
Mm-hmm.
I think who was it? I saw a comment on Twitter the other day. It was someone who's saying that I mean, people like Stephen King say that he still finds it hard to write.
Yep. Yep.
And he's
Yep.
someone who's dabbled in different genres as well, between fantasy and horror, obviously, and also in crime and detective novels and stuff like that.
Right.
And he says every single novel he writes, he finds it hard. I remember reading into about David Gemmell, and he's written about 50 or
Oh,
so novels. He's really
yeah.
prolific UK author, and he is saying that it's really hard. He was someone who dabbles in. He's written historical fantasy because they're set in
Mm-hmm.
there, but he wrote a sort of retelling of the War of Troy, and
Yep.
he's written some books about it's set in ancient Greece as well. But he said it's really difficult. I think writing is. I think no matter how many books you write, it's still going to be difficult. But I think
Yeah.
around it, you're right. The stages around the writing process, you can skip through them a little bit faster. I'd say a little bit
Yeah.
faster.
Yeah,
but
for
it'll never
sure.
be easy. It'll never be easy.
Yeah, well, there's a when you're writing something that is taking so much out of you creatively,
Yeah,
and you as a,
absolutely.
you know, you're putting so much of you as a person. It's a very vulnerable craft.
It is. Yeah,
um
yeah,
yeah, I mean, there's a cost to that. There just is, you know, a
yeah.
time and energy and all of that. So you have to put other things on your back burner, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, reading. I'm the same way. As soon as I started reading, or I started writing again, early February, all of a sudden I didn't want to read as much, because
I
I
know.
want to be in my own world and be with my characters and write.
Yeah,
And then I hit a reading slump because I was like,
yeah.
I want to read books, but I need to write.
And you know what is
So,
that I don't know if you self-edit at all, but you know what
mhm.
was really terrible for me is that I couldn't take off like my editing hat. So when I
Right.
started reading some fantasy stuff, I used to look at the page and I'd say, "Oh, he's used the same adjective twice in a couple of sentences there," or "Oh,
Yeah.
shouldn't there be a comma?" Like, "Oh, he doesn't use the Oxford comma. Oh, that's interesting," and things like that. And like my brain just and it takes me out of the story. It's terrible, and
Yeah.
it's awful. It's awful
It's,
because you're as again we're talking about escapism, and when you read things, you're not meant to be working. You're meant to be relaxing, and
yeah.
when you start picking out things like that, oh, yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, which is another reason why I read things a bit different while I'm writing and editing, and then I normally have a sort of pause. Now I've just finished Titanica, so and that's. It's still another round of editing to go, which had better hurry up because we're in March for April, but there's still one more round of editing to go.
You can do it.
And yeah, I can do it. And then that'll be out. And then I'll probably take a bit of a break
Yeah.
and read some more fantasy then. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really smart way to go about it. So I have to ask, you know, we've dabbled in the minotaurs a little bit, but one of the
Yeah.
things I always find really fascinating, and certainly when I was writing my minotaur inspired race for Bloodstones, it's very different in my mind writing human characters
Oh yeah.
than it is writing these non-human, whatever, if they're harpies or minotaurs, or you've got the
Yeah.
titans. Like, so
Yep.
how do you approach those non-human characters differently, and what are some of the challenges and things that you face with them as opposed to your human characters?
Yeah, that's a really excellent question, actually, and it's something I struggled with a little bit. And I think that one of the things I used to do is that I still do actually, when I'm editing my stuff afterwards, is that I take all of like the ancillary dialogue and
Mm-hmm.
the ancillary paragraphs and anything that's not dialogue, I sort of take it out of the text. And I just read the lines of dialogue. And
Mm-hmm.
to me, when you just read the lines of dialogue, you should have a reader should have an idea of who's saying them, right?
Right.
So even without the dialogue tags, even without you should be able to say straight, okay, well that's obviously that's not a human that's saying that, or that's
Right.
well
Right. Right.
that's that's an antagonist who's saying that, or that sort of thing. And I think that's quite a good little tip that I taught myself. And once I got that down, I kind of yeah, it made it easier. And another thing I did was for the so I don't know if this is a massive spoiler, but there are gods in both of the series I wrote. War of the 12, they're gods. Ruined gods, they're gods.
I was going to
And
say no way.
yeah, sorry. And yeah, War of the 12, there are gods as well, and or demigods at least. And in both cases, they're both kind of emotionless. One of the themes that runs
Mm,
through both of the books is that they're kind of, because they were, and if you read Greek mythology, that this comes out over and over and over again. I mean, the gods were just the only emotions they had. They were petulant.
yeah.
They were arrogant. They were vicious. They were self-serving. They were all of these things, but they didn't have very many redeeming qualities. They didn't. And one of the sort of things, having read Greek mythology for a while, one of the sort of things that always comes out is that they not only are they not altruistic, is they're not really caring. They're not really.
Right.
You don't get the impression they know really what parenthood is, or they don't really. I mean, Zeus, I don't know how many children.
Right.
He was very promiscuous, and most of the other gods did as well. But there's no care for them, or there was no sort of love or any sort of thing. And I sort of took that as a foundation of my gods in my books, is that they don't really understand what
Right.
humanity is. They don't really have a
Right.
close under. I mean, they look human for the most part, but they don't really understand how we work. They don't understand how we can be influenced by emotion, and how we would be capable of, they would never, it would never appeal to them, or even they would never even have the idea of sacrificing themselves to someone else. Whereas
Hmm.
I don't know, I'm sure you're the same, but like once you're a parent, I always found it really funny. I became a parent fairly late in life. I had my first kid when I was 32. So I was in that very select club at one point when everyone had children apart from me.
Right.
So they were like, "Oh, look at little, Jeff, eating his little apples, isn't he great?" and stuff. I was like, what are you doing? Like, children are terrible. And then I had a kid, and I like looked at my kid, and I said, "I would die for you." And
Yep.
there's just that change that just switches on, and that is just uncontrollable. You
Yeah.
can't suppress it. There's no way you can, you would do anything for your kid. And it's an emotion that's very is difficult to describe,
It
and
is.
difficult
Yeah.
to explain. How can you explain that to someone that doesn't have children? How can you say, that they are everything, like everything else? As soon as you have kids, everything else sort of like drops down the ladder, right? So
Right.
your husband or wife is still kind of up there, but like everything else, like your work, your health, your everything else sort of like goes down, and
Yep.
your kids take up the top rung of the ladder. And writing, I think writing gods or writing supernatural beings or things like that, if you start with if you posit that they don't know what that is, they have no
Mhm.
idea what these sort of emotions are, they have no idea what it is to have that unexplainable strong emotion like love or self-sacrifice or things like that. That really helped me find the voice around that. That's a really long answer. I apologize.
No,
And
you're good.
and for the sort of non-human races, I think that's more so like the minotaurs barely speak in the first
Mm.
novel because they're more antagonistic, and we learn a
Hmm.
lot more about them in the second novel because they become slightly less antagonistic.
Mm.
And you learn that they're very sort of tribal, nomadic, and things like that. And I think the lifestyle and the way they sort of clothe themselves, and their sort of religion stuff, I think that all then informs their dialogue.
Right.
So
Right.
for me, kind of naturally, the fact that they're nomadic and that they're very interested in, they use the stars to guide themselves, and to them the outside life was all they really knew, and they were all into
Hmm.
freedom and nature and respecting the sort of balance between, and all when you think about all of that, that sort of flows into how they're going to speak. So they're going to be respectful, they're close knit communities, so they're going to
Yeah.
be bonded. They're gonna be There's going to be a hierarchy there as well,
Yep.
because when you have these small communities, you have to have a sort of guide, and all of that stuff, and it all sort of flows together, and then you get dialogue which is like that. So you get dialogue which is very earthy, very natural, very respectful, subservient, and very respectful between sort of the male and females as well,
Right.
because it's all sort of interwoven, again, with these close knit communities. There are people, the families that have grown up together and that have been working together, and the role of the mother and the wife in these close knit tribes is really important as well.
Yep.
It's yeah, so that sort of informs the dialogue.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, they all that's kind of how it works for me. I take the lifestyle, and then I take the dialogue from that, really, rather than the other way around.
Yeah, it's fun, I think, and I don't know if you found this, but I always find it really fun to challenge myself. Say, okay, I want to set aside
Oh yeah,
the way I think as a human and figure
yeah,
out how is this different? How do they view the world differently? How, and like you said, how is their hierarchy different? Their
yeah.
lifestyle, the values that they have would are different, and it's just such a fascinating thing to dig into. I think when you have those, and it can so sharply contrast then whatever it is the humans are doing on the opposite end. So yeah, that's always a fun playground, I think, as a fantasy author, for me at
Yeah,
least.
absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's like for me, it was the challenge there was that in the first series I wrote, War of the 12, the antagonists were they're called the Greyling. So they're basically, I mean, they're basically the sort of orc and goblin,
Right.
gremlin sort of trope. So they're just pure evil. I mean, there's nothing to save there. There's just
No redeeming
there's,
qualities.
yeah, no, none at all. They're just sadists. They have absolutely no regard for human life whatsoever. And then coming to the ruined gods, the antagonists here are there's a bit more nuance to it.
Right.
When we first in the first book, when we encounter the minotaurs, actually they're sort of coming over the mountains where they used to sort of settle. They used to never really come over the mountains. So it's a sort of natural border between the human city states and then the sort of nomadic tribes of the minotaurs that used to roam the plains on the other side of this big mountain range. And they've been forced. I mean, they've come over the mountains to attack the human settlements for some reason. And so when you see it from the human side of things, it's, oh, we're being invaded, all that.
Right.
And then in the second book, when you get to see a bit more from the Tauran side of things, that you kind of realize it's not that simple, and that they've been forced to do that for reasons.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
I found pretty interesting to write as well.
Yeah, I bet. So going forward, you've got Titanica coming out on the 11th.
Yeah.
What's I noticed when
April 11th,
sorry, we're in March right now.
I know we are. Just,
when
I really hope we're in March and not April, because I still got an editing round to do. So
you got time. You're good.
Yeah.
When I was kind of perusing on your website, I love that you have the progress bars. Mine are horribly out of date, but I love.
Yeah, mine are pretty out of date, but yeah.
But I noticed that you have a secret project listed on there. So what's next? What's in the works? What you said you're going to kind of take a break after Titanica.
Yeah.
Where are you going after this? What can you tell us?
Yeah, sure. So the two things I'm kind of working on. The first one isn't really a secret at all, because when I finished the War of the 12 quartet, last year I brought out a omnibus, which looks like this, reaching behind me again. Yeah. So this is the omnibus vision. So this is something I want to do, and this is something that I'm actually quite proud of. So this has it has like the sort of naked cover stuff, and then it has then I commissioned like some character drawings and stuff. So I really like this. And so this has the four novels in it, and it also has 2 fairly short stories.
Oh, cool.
And the second short story, which is at the end of the book, is set, I think, about 10-12 years after the end of the first story. And that story ends with a little tagline that that story will continue in a series called The Legacy of the 12. So so Legacy of the 12 is another series that I'm just starting to think about, which will come back to those characters. But again, you were talking about challenging ourselves, so it won't be those exact same characters. It will be about 20 years later, 15 or so years later. So it'll be able to, I'm sure the previous characters will cameo in it. They've got Easter eggs and stuff. But I want it to be different. And the world will have moved on a bit as well, because I always find it strange where you have these epic fantasies that sort of have a 100-year lifespan, that nothing really sort of changes, whereas whereas in human history, we went from Watandorp huts to castles in 100 years. So your world has to evolve as you're sort of going through it. And the other project, I don't know if I can really say too much about that. I'm actually further forwards in that project than the other one, but it's different again. So it's going to be it's a sort of crime fantasy, sort of mystery fantasy thing. So
I'm intrigued.
I think that's what it's going to be. So
nice.
I've written a bit of that. But that's pretty challenging, because that's changing things again. So for sure. I'm sure people that like my first series will hate it. and some people that like it might then go into the other series and say, well, I'm reading this mystery thing, and then I'm going into this.
What's funny though is I've thought several times this last year or so that I would love to see more like murder mystery or crime style fantasy. I just think that
Yeah,
that's a subgenre that really has a lot of potential that hasn't been
yeah,
explored a whole lot yet.
yeah. I agree. But then you have to like the hurdles that I'm having to face are things like how I mean, you don't want it to be pulpy, right? So you don't want it to be
Right,
like
right,
a pulp detective story. So you have to kind of avoid those tropes of the trench coats and the
right.
cigarettes and the heavy rain and the So I don't really want to do all of that. You did the sort of grizzle detective. You don't really do all of that stuff. And also you have to base it still has to be rooted in fantasy, right? So they
Right,
can't suddenly dust for fingerprints or it's stupid what I'm saying, but you know what I mean.
right. Oh yeah.
It has to work as a fantasy and as a sort of mystery thing. So I don't
Hmm.
know. I don't really know whether that will work out,
Sure.
but that's kind of what I'm
Just kind
exploring
of
at
exploring
the
it.
moment.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
I'm excited. I hope that that's something that you continue with because I would definitely love to read more of that kind of a
But you're just
subgenre. So
putting more pressure on me now, Tori.
sorry, sorry. It'll be fine. It'll be great. Um,
Yeah. Oh, so yeah, trench coat, sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, throw a trench coat in your
Grizzled,
fantasy.
yeah,
It's
bit of trench
fine.
coat, yeah. There's only leather, comes from cows, sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it'll be just a hide trench coat.
Hide trench coat, yeah, a
Yeah,
hide trench coat and tobacco, sure.
sure,
Tobacco,
sure. Why not?
cigarettes, yeah, get that
Yep.
in there. But yeah. So that's those are two things I wanna try and do, but I'm gonna have a
Yeah.
bit of a break. So
Yes.
normally
Well
I have a bit of a
deserved.
break. I normally take about a month off in between, and then I normally try. Do you have one last tangent? But do you have
No,
a
yeah.
we were talking about schedules and stuff. Do you sort of try to adhere to a word count or anything like that, or you're just like, oh, today I've written 10 words that I'm going to write, or
Yeah.
yeah, the
I
second one.
I I have I'm always so impressed by my friends in the community
Oh yeah,
who have these incredibly consistent schedules where they, wake up at a certain time in the morning and
yeah,
they write for a certain amount of time, they get a certain amount of word counts in every day.
yeah,
I I tend to have a little bit more of a scattered brain to
yeah.
begin
Me
with.
too. Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and so for me, creativity is very dependent on the external factors. It's very
yeah,
dependent on mood, on which
yeah,
does mean that sometimes it'll take me a little bit longer to organize myself long enough to write a book.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I mean, it's I try.
yeah. Oh yeah, we all try.
sometimes sometimes I'll have a span of like 2 weeks where I'll write 500 to 1,000 words a day and I'm clipping
Yeah,
along, and then I just burn out for a little bit and I need to
yep,
pause, take a step back, put some creative input in where, read a favorite book or
yep.
watch some favorite films and just let my brain turn off for a while. So yeah, I think it's tough as an author, I think, to find your individual process because it's going to look a little, because even though you and I have a lot of similarities in how we approach writing, we still have different processes, right?
Oh
Because we're
yeah,
each
yeah.
each individual authors, and kind of discovering what works for you and how to help yourself be as productive as possible is going to look different for everybody.
I 100% agree, and
Yeah.
I think trying to force yourself into, I see things like I'm going to butcher the name. You remember the November writing contest? Is it
NaNoWriMo.
Nan? Thank you.
Yep.
Terrible. Once you get past 40, your memory just goes.
It's just
And
gone.
and yeah, I always see people doing that. I'm going to write like 50K words this month and stuff. And I'm really admirative to people that do that. But I'm
Yeah.
always kind of thinking, are those 50K words going to be good?
Hmm.
Maybe they are, maybe they're not.
Yeah.
Maybe you take those 50K words and then you edit it and you find out that actually, half those words you might
Right.
not hang around. But maybe they will. I don't know. But I
Yeah.
always, yeah, I don't want to have that, as you were saying. I don't want to have that sort of thing of getting up and thinking, okay, I have to do. And me, I write
Yeah.
quite a lot in the evening because I have my day job. So when I
Yep.
come home, I'm really pretty tired. If I have to
Yeah.
say to myself, I have to write, I have to do this. Are those if I have to write 1,000 words, it's better to write 500 good ones than 1,000
Right.
bad ones. So if
100%.
I'm saying I have to do these 1,000 words, there's going to come a time when I'm going to try and hit that mark, and I'm going
Yep.
to write fluff. just
No,
to try
right.
and hit it.
Just to try to
One,
get there.
yeah, yeah. And I was reading something on the one of the discords. There's a discord called Page Tellers, which if I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if you're part of that one, but if indie authors are interested in that, it's definitely a good place to hang out. There's Keymark, there's Page Turners, there's Indie Accords. There are quite a few discords that are geared towards indie authors, and you should definitely check them out if you're interested in indie writing, just to be part of a community.
Yeah.
And Jason Byrne, who writes, who you may
Mm-hmm.
have heard of,
Wistful Ascending. Yep. Love
yeah,
Joe.
he writes a lot of books. So he has a completely different process to ours. Is that he will write uh, a book in 2 months, right? So he'll write like
Yep.
he'll just go, he'll just like spew out of him, like right, and they're good books. He'll
Yeah.
write a really good book in 2 months, and then he'll just do nothing for 2 months.
Yep.
And he'll just like mark his book and say and try and spark controversy on Twitter and things like that.
Yep.
And that was sarcasm, by the way. And
Yeah.
then he'll write another book in like 2 or 3 months, and he'll burn through like his creative sort of like his creative tank, and it will go, and he'll bring it out, and it'll be another great book. It'll be even better than the first one, and then I'll take 2 months off, and so. Yeah, as you were saying, everyone's different, and that process for him works perfectly. And there are people that have written books during that month of November, those 50K and 60K, that they've then published, and they've been great books as well. I've heard stories of really, really great books have been written during that period and that have come out and have been. Legends and Latte, I think, didn't that start off? Travis Goldie. I wonder if he didn't start writing that off as a writing competition, and then he expanded it and stuff. But a lot was written during that period.
I discovered NaNoWriMo back when I was in college, actually, and I'm trying to remember how many years I did it. 8, I think. And of those 8 years, I started what was the predecessor to Bloodstones back in college during a NaNoWriMo, and I discovered that writing a really complex epic fantasy for NaNoWriMo was a bad idea. But like Phased was actually a NaNoWriMo novel in 2019, and the first draft was it existed on the planet. But going with a good editor and I'm that one worked. I have several books that will never see the light of day that I did for NaNoWriMo that I just needed to kind of get out of my system. But there's, I did one in 2014 that I'll probably polish up and rewrite and publish at some point. So
that's 10 years ago. So you've actually been doing this way longer than I have. You should be giving me tips. I don't know what I'm doing. Doing all these tips. You should be telling me how to.
No, I learned so much from every author I talk to. I learned so much from the people I talk to, and I'm just on a learning journey. And I have a lot of experience in the writing world due to having published so early and with all of that, but I'm on such a learning curve, and I love getting to hear from everybody's different perspectives. Cause you reaffirming the ads, I haven't tried ads yet, but reaffirming that, I'll probably wait until I have, the whole trilogy out.
It's an opinion, to take into account with other opinions.
But I've heard
it didn't work for me personally, but yeah.
And I think that makes a lot of sense because readers, especially who don't know you, right? In the indie community, we have a lot of readers who know us, who interact with us all the time. But once you get out into that wider sphere of Amazon, these are people who have no idea who we are. And so they're concerned with, I'm looking for a fun fantasy series to read, right? And I don't want to have to wait for the next book. So it makes a lot of sense that would work better.
Especially as, unfortunately, people don't finish their fantasy trilogies. That's another problem. I think that's another reason why people wait and why people get annoyed with people like Rothfuss or Martin is that they buy the first book, they get involved, and then they wanna finish it. And unfortunately, there are lots of indie authors where just life gets in the way, or they write the first one, I said, okay, no, I'm done.
Too much.
I'm gonna write another one, or I didn't realize it'd be this expensive. I didn't realize, and I think it's about, I want to say 2 or 3 out of 10 maybe indie authors I know, they don't go. They haven't finished the whole thing yet, which is fine, and maybe they will one day, maybe they won't, whatever. But I think readers certainly take that into account. You're 100% right. But
for
I
sure.
did also want to highlight, just to come back to what you're saying, is that the the uh, the kindness and support
Hmm.
and sort of uplifting
Yeah,
just community, indie community, for me was an amazing surprise, because I
absolutely.
don't think I've ever come across yet, either on the reviewing, video blogger side of things, or on the author side of things. I don't think I've come across anyone who's been,
Yeah,
unwelcoming,
right,
or I don't know. Obviously you've been in this for longer than me, but I really haven't come across that many unpleasant
yeah.
people. I mean, you get the occasional controversy,
Well,
like Jason
sure.
Dunn, stirring controversy, but you also get people that seriously stir controversy.
Oh,
But
sure.
they're not major players in the
Right,
industry. It's hot takes by people that are a lot of the time just trying to get attention.
right,
Um, but I think generally most of the people, even people that have been doing this for years, like Rob Hayes, who puts out his
right.
indie
Yep,
buy list every month, which is a really
yep,
nice thing to do, because
yep.
he's putting out his own competition, basically.
Right.
And people like Ben Galley, people that have been doing this for a while.
Yeah,
And are still there, giving advice and helping people and stuff like that. And there's really not this sort of competitive mindset that I think you can find in other domains of
right.
in other hobbies and other other artistic endeavors, let's say.
Absolutely.
So that's something that's really surprised me, and I continue to be amazed by that even now.
It's a wonderful part, I think, of being an indie author. And what I love too about it is this kind of really open, uplifting community. And like you said, I mean, largely it's such a welcoming, open, uplifting, and supportive place to be in. And it's such a wonderful resource that we have now. Um, and also that we're seeing, I think, a lot of the breakdown of barriers between trad pub and indie and hybrid
Oh
authors.
yeah,
we're
oh
we're all
100%.
just
Yeah,
mixing together because
yeah,
we all love to write great stories. And
yeah,
I think we're slowly seeing the breakdown of that stigma and that separation between different vehicles of publishing, which I love that. um, and I love
yeah. I
that I
agree.
can have a post that gets a conversation going between a trad pub author and an indie
Yeah,
author and a blogger
yeah.
and it's a great part of the intermingling of our community, which is, yeah, it's a fabulous
And
aspect
I
of it.
really, I really like seeing trad authors doing indie stuff, and indie authors
Yes.
doing trad stuff as well.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
Legends and Latte, again, him going and I'm trying to think, is it John French? I think he wrote
Yeah,
Grey
Jonathan
Bastards,
French. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
who that went on to be traditionally published, if I'm not mistaken, and things like
Yep.
that. So that sort of switching back and forth as well in between,
Yep.
or Brandon Sanderson, who is basically an indie publisher now,
Yeah.
with his secret projects.
Yeah.
So yeah, I find it really interesting that as well. Sort of,
Absolutely.
yeah, blending both sides of the divide.
Well, it helps, I think, too, because at the end of the day, it allows authors to pursue whatever avenue is the best fit for them individually, which is what we all want, right? We want to have
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
options of what fits best for me as a writer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for some people, if that's starting indie, going trad, vice versa, staying indie, staying trad, like you have whatever option is the best one for you, which is great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I 100% agree.
Yeah. So as a kind of closing for the interview, what is a piece of advice that if you could go back to Alex Robbins prior to publishing your first book,
Yeah. Yeah.
what would you tell yourself?
All those years ago.
Yeah.
Um, what would I tell myself? Oh, I thought you were going to say what I was
Yeah.
going to tell other people. What would I tell myself?
Well, it's kind of
I
both in one.
think, yeah. I think I would tell myself not to try, and I think we talked about this earlier, but not to try and base your writing on something else or someone else,
Yeah.
or you're not, if you decided you're not going to write to market. So writing to market is when you take
Hmm.
certain tropes and certain writing styles and apply them to a book in the hopes to make it marketable and bankable.
Right.
If you decided not to do that, if you decided to write for yourself, then you need to write for yourself with your own voice, and your own voice
Yes.
might not be something that everyone likes, and it might not be. It might be first person, second person, third person. It might be multiple points of views. It might be really descriptive. It might have a lot of action scenes. It might have a prologue. It might, I know.
Not the prologues.
It might be a rapid release. You might release all 3 of your books at once. You might do one a year. You might do hardbacks. You might do audiobooks. You might have chapter headings. You might not have chapter headings. You might have a glossary. Some people don't want to read my books because it has a glossary at the start of it. It might have maps. It might not have maps. So if you decide, I think that's what you need to, because I when I started writing it, there was that pressure to try and get as close as I could to the books I like to read.
Right.
And by doing that, sometimes you get a bit too close and you lose your own voice trying to imitate something else.
Absolutely.
And the word shouldn't be imitation; it should be inspiration. So you should be inspired by the stuff you're reading, but not actually, imitate.
Right.
What about that? That's a pretty good quote, right?
That's a good one. Yeah, I like that one. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's my philosophy minor. So that to me is important. If you find if you get into your own groove and do your own thing, people that like your style of writing will eventually find you, and they'll come to you and they'll talk to other friends that read the same sort of thing they do, and you'll get traction that way.
Right.
And you'll be happy because you'll be writing something, and it'll be easier for you to write because you'll be writing something that comes more easily to you than trying to base your writing on someone else.
Right.
I was always so worried that I wouldn't, coming back to that tree, I used to reread myself sometimes and say, okay, they're going through this forest. I'm not talking about like what the bark's like on the trees, or is there moss on those trees, or what's the road like? What kind of trees are there? Are there pine needles on the floor? What they're wearing, and I should take up 2 pages to do this. And then I sort of realized, well, I don't have to do that because that's not how I write. So why should I try and force myself to do that? And that's my advice. Inspiration, not imitation. Yeah.
I think that's perfect. And honestly, because I know a lot of people that, watch the interviews that we do, and we have a spread of people who need to hear that, right? We have the people that have been writing for a while that need to be reminded it's okay to just write your own stuff,
and write something different.
Hopefully the brand new writers that are really excited and they're putting out their first book or working on their first book, it allows them to kind of shortcut some of the things that we learned through the process. So I always ask because I appreciate that. Really quickly, hello, Ari Morley. Nice to see you.
Hello.
And Anitha shows up a little bit, but that's okay.
No, I mean, it's time zones, It's even with Tori talking about it earlier between, whether are we at +7? Are we +8? Are you Central? Are you Eastern? Are you I don't know. How many are there? Like 4 time zones in your country?
I mean, we have to give ourselves a little bit of credit because we're both very scatterbrained people, as we've discussed in the live stream, and yet we both managed, despite our different time zones, to show up at the same time. So go us.
We did. Yeah, I know. Great. Yeah, patting myself on the back. There we go. Perfect. Yeah.
So Alex, thank you so much for joining me on the channel.
An absolute pleasure.
I wish you the absolute best for your launch in April. Titanica, again, for people catching the replay, 3rd book in the Ruined Gods trilogy, coming out on April 11th, not March 11th, April 11th.
Yep.
And
you can pre-order it now, so you can pre-order it now. You'll get it.
Down in the description box below.
Thank you.
There are links to Alex's website, so you can go and check out all of his books and get more information about the release. So definitely go check that out. And while you're waiting, grab Panacea and get started because you still have time to catch up. So
exactly, and read Tori's book as well, and then you'll get 2 different tastes of Minotaur-inspired races.
Yes, yeah,
and I'd love to chat with you again sometime.
Absolutely.
It's been fun. You can do a launch party when your 2nd book comes out.
Absolutely.
We'll celebrate.
That would be fun. Yeah. Thank you so much, Alex.
Thank you so much, Ray. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you to everybody who joined us. Have a good rest of your day.